This is an update to my Witchhunter build. Do take note that all the changes that you will see in this video are already reflected to the Mobalytics link, which I have included in the video description below. For easy browsing, I strongly recommend you check out the link later. But for now, let me explain why I made these changes. The first build I have showcased is still viable, but I just had to make a few tweaks to it. Thanks also to the comments of people that really made the build a lot stronger and efficient in farming endgame levels. So basically, the best fix I had to do, that was suggested by you guys, is removing the efficiency 2 in the build and going for the Defy mod 2, as it works well with the new constricting Viper cap. What Defy 2 does is allow your character to use skills even if you are low in mana. The requirement, though, is that you will need to be surrounded, which is easily done by equipping the constricting Viper cap. But it's not that easy though, as this unique is not cheap. A quick advice in buying this unique from other players is that instead of the usual 6 or 5 fewer enemies, you can actually get all the benefit from the while being surrounded modifier by getting a version with 4 fewer enemies. Remember that the requirement to be surrounded is at least 5 enemies, so if you have 4 fewer enemies, then it only needs 1 enemy to obtain the modifier. The 6 fewer enemies are really overkill, and it doesn't give you any benefits at all, unless you are into maxing all the other stats of the Viper cap. The next thing I want to talk is on the Witchhunter ascendancy tree. Before posting this video, I made sure that I tested the build a couple of times in mapping and pinnacle bosses. Now, most of my tests in pinnacle boss is with Xesht. As first of all, this boss is the best when it comes to farming divines right now. It doesn't drop divines constantly, mind you, but it drops good loot which you can trade for exalted, then turn into divines. The controlled metamorphosis does drop pretty often for me, with 150% item rarity modifier on my gears. Also, with the amount of item rarity I have, the boss managed to drop the UL Nethol's Embrace, the new lineage support gem, which happens to be selling for 10 divines right now. Because of this, I have managed to get my very first Headhunter and upgrade a bunch of gears not just for this character, but also for the other builds I am currently working and will share with you once they are well cooked. Also, Xesht farming allowed me to earn divines to get my first Rakiata's flow lineage support. But let's expand this part of the video later, as I want to get back first on the ascendancy changes. In my previous video, I have the concentration mechanic turned on for my Witchhunter, and some of you suggested that I should not use it as it's just a gimmick at endgame levels. After testing it for weeks, I truly can vouch for those guys that you don't need this skill at endgame levels. With 108% penetration and high damage in my build, paired with the Culling Strike and Decimating Strike passive in my Witchhunter, I only saw a slight variation when it comes to kill speed. Just around 3 to 4 seconds difference, killing Xesht. What really helps melt the health of Tier 3 Xesht is the Decimating Strike that lowers the health values of the boss before a hit is applied. Basically, starting off with either a cluster or explosive grenade will remove a huge chunk of life, especially if the 30% procs from Decimating Strike. And mind you, this is before doing the actual hit of the skill. Then, the Culling Strike will do the finishing touches, paired with this damage versus low-life small passives that grants increased damage when enemy's health is at 35%. Instead of the Witchbane and No Mercy notables, I tested the Obsessive Rituals and Ceremonial Ablution, which turned out to be a huge improvement to the build. Now, Sorcery Ward lessen your evasion and armor by a ton, but it gives you a protective barrier which takes elemental damage hit before going through your evasion and armor. This is really insane, especially at endgame levels, as most of the monsters will deal elemental damage. In Tier 16 maps, I have no problem with this build, as the Sorcery Ward mechanic does what it tells it would do. The only downside, though, is that my armor rating and evasion really dropped so low for endgame levels that I have to make sacrifices on my gears. With that, I finally decided to remove the Leopold's Applause Gloves to make room for more armor, evasion, and elemental resistance rating. Mind you, this is just a gloves that dropped from Xesht, and I was lucky enough to corrupt it with extra slot. The best type of glove would be something that has high armor values, so we can make good use of the leather-bound gauntlet notables that provides more evasion per armor. The stats you should be are added fire to attacks, increased rarity, and some elemental resistances. I would say that this is not perfect, but it would do for now. I did make sure that I also invested on more damage with the gears, since I'm missing out a lot from the negative elemental resistance bonus from the Leopold's gloves. I tried to go with fire penetration 2 in my build, so that every hit will ignore enemy fire resistance. But it means that I sacrifice elemental armament 2, which gives a huge damage boost to both cluster and explosive shot. The same goes with fire attunement. Instead of messing with my support gem setup, I decided to invest on jewels on my passive tree. I kept the Megalomaniac Diamond with the volcanic skin for extra fire resistance and damage. Then I still anointed my amulet with cremation that adds extra fire damage and penetration. The rest of the jewels are with fire damage and fire penetration. The main idea is to get 75% fire penetration so that it feels like I'm using fire penetration 2 that ignores fire resistance without equipping it in my main damage skill gems. This is better in my opinion, because most of the jewel slots I have currently can easily be obtained with my passive tree allocation. I did not waste any skill points just to get a jewel slot. Well, for the most part, as for the last jewel slot, I did invest 3 points to get it. It's not really a waste though, since I needed the extra strength to activate my Herald of Ash. This part over here will be so much better if only I have more attribute points in my gears. But that would mean I would have to reconstruct my gear setup again. Currently, I also have the Grand Regalia, which I have said in my previous video that it's not needed. But because of the optimized setup I have, the extra attribute, chaos resistance, and elemental resistance provided by this gear piece completes the build. It's not an essential part of the build, but again, if you can manage to get attributes and elemental resistances, especially on your rings, amulet, boots, and gloves, then you won't be needing the Grand Regalia. The balance armor, evasion, and energy shield of this gear piece is good, but your survivability would be better if you will have at least 60% evasion rating in the build. Finally, let's talk more about optimization in the damage part of this build. I have the Headhunter build, which is not a huge feat for many, but it is for a noob like me. Now, this unique item is really broken with this build in mapping. Every time you get a modifier from a rare monster, this build becomes stupidly strong, especially if you have something with increase area or multiple projectiles. Long story short, it makes the build more fun in mapping. But here's the catch. I am using the ingenuity belt with 30+% of bonus from both rings. This ramp up the stats of my rings, including the item rarity, which then scales to over 150% if I have the belt. With the Headhunter build, this build's item rarity on gear will get down to 130%. I have seen a very informative video regarding rarity last week. It was from a channel named Farham, and I posted the link on his channel below. So the main idea that I digested from the video is comparing 500% item rarity to 150% item rarity, and the result was it has a minimal difference. I thought 120% item rarity is enough, but seeing how often he drops tier 5 items and higher tier currencies with 150% changed my mind. In fact, I have tested it myself, and like I have said earlier, the loot is better while farming Uber Xesht, and I mostly get controlled metamorphosis, and those new lineage support does drop more often compared to having 120% rarity. This is why, if you can invest more rarity in your rings and amulet, then I strongly recommend getting the 150% baseline. If you can have that, then the Headhunter setup for this build will be more rewarding. Also, I would like to discuss another suggestion from you guys, and that is equipping the Rakiata's Flow Lineage gem in my main damage skills. This is a great lineage skill, but it costs 21 divines, or days, to target farm it in the Atlas map. It usually drops from Tavakai boss maps, but the chances are pretty slim, which makes it better to buy it from the market. Like I have said, it's a good skill because that 75% elemental resistance from Xesht gets inverted, which means you deal more damage to the boss. The problem is that it needs to be at both cluster and explosive grenade, and honestly, I really don't need it in my build. With 75% penetration, I can still kill Uber Pinnacle bosses with the damage I have, plus the ascendancy I allocated from the Witchhunter. It may not be an overkill build, but it's more than enough when it comes to farming. Another thing that I don't like about Rakiata's flow is that those enemies that don't have resistances will not get affected by the effect. It's great for those enemies that has very high defenses, and it's honestly better than penetration or exposure. But right now, I don't need it. It's an option, but I will be sticking with this Witchhunter build for now. I can say that this Witchhunter build is finally finished, and I am moving on to another character. I do have a couple of ones, which I also invested divines already. Some failed, and I needed to buy another piece of armor again, or change ascendancy. But it's really fun experimenting on stuff right now, especially that there are tons of options with the 0.3 update. I really can't stick with just one class, and I do have a Deadeye build, which I also link in the video description below. I also have one for Lich, but I think of pausing the progress of this character right now. I'm fully invested on a Titan build, which is a bit different from the meta ones. All of the cool Titan builds are holding one big hammer with Giant's Blood, but I wanted to do a fast, heavy-hitting Titan like what I did in classic Diablo 2 Barbarian. It's far from finished, but I promise to share progress to you really soon. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you for subscribing into my humble channel. If you are new here, then please consider subscribing if you like my content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again in my next guide.